Hello and welcome to an Open Era Gold replay. It is I, Devang Desai. Simon and I are off this week, but we decided we wanted to look back at an old episode we did that's a bit unconventional. Back on May 17th, 2021, Simon and I were recapping what happened in Rome, which included Iga Swiatek laying down a marker that would foreshadow what was to come, and then some, plus, oh yeah, another meeting of Nadal and Djokovic, who are in Rome in 2024, while some of the young guns, namely Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner, set this one out. So we thought it was fitting to look back at an episode we did a few years ago. It's not necessarily a look back, so I thought it was even more interesting because you could kind of see what we got right, maybe what we got wrong about where these players were heading, and some general overall thoughts about Roger Federer, Ash, Barty, and Andy Murray, which I think are a bit funny as well to look back on, as we got some things correct and some things oh so wrong, as we are prone to do. So enjoy this Open Era Gold look back at Rome. We'll talk to you soon. Hello and welcome to the Open Era Podcast. My name is Devang Desai and I'm joined as always by Mr. Simon Bushell. Simon, I think it was fitting that we got another Nadal-Djokovic classic. We're going to get into that a bunch in the middle of this show, Bush, but feels like spring really does hit when we get one of these epics like the clay courts like to produce. I feel like clay is really the place for these spectacles to go down, and it wasn't a disappointment on Sunday with Nadal and Djokovic, but throughout the week I thought on both sides, ATP, WTA, we saw some really good stuff in Rome.
I thought so as well. I thought it was a really interesting tournament as we head into the French Open, just a few weeks away from that as well. So a really exciting time of the year. I've always found Rome a really tricky one to predict, just following on from Madrid and just everything in such closely tight, packed schedule. You're never really sure how it's going to go, but if one thing is like clockwork, Rafael Nadal makes another clay court Masters final, and it did produce a very, very good match. I will take issue with the word classic. I'm not sure it was quite that good, but it was pretty damn interesting.
It wasn't, and I think with the time moving ever so fast, the term classic is being thrown around very liberally because it's like, well, we never know. What if they don't play each other that many times again in the future? So it's fair, but you're right. It wasn't a classic per se, and I think the dips in level from both players and at different times, and with Novak playing 8,000 hours of tennis on Saturday and playing on Sunday, you weren't going to get them at their best, but we'll get into that a bit later. The other, I think, big takeaway from Rome, and it's something that we've been seeing for a good year now, is that Iga Swiatek is the real deal. 46 minutes to win her first title in Rome, Bush, a double bagel over Karolina Pliskova. I don't think demolished is being accurate here. I think there are stronger words to use, Simon, for what went down in the early hours of Sunday morning in Rome, because this wasn't remotely close, and I felt a bit bad for Karolina, but on the positive end, Iga Swiatek, Bush, like, this person has now backed up a breakout campaign in 2020 with just more incredible tennis in 2021, and now it's a WTA 1000 event title for her. She's the fourth teenager to win a tour level event at this juncture.
I don't have the words to describe it anymore of just how incredible this achievement is. A double bagel in the final of a tournament of this stature against a former world number one. That is ridiculous. It's on a scale that we've not seen in decades, probably since Rafael Nadal first came onto the tour on clay. She lost 4 points in the opening set. 4 points. That's how dominating it was. I mean, the list of things that we could say about this match is endless, like the amount of time that it took to dispatch her, but I think that says it all. 4 points dropped in one set against a former world number one is pretty spectacular.
The sensational Swiatek is the new ruler in Rome. An outstanding performance against the former champion and former world number one. It was flawless. And this incredible young talent has taken another big step forward in this already impressive young career. What a display. A straight set win for Iga Swiatek, who's the champion of the Italian Open. 6-love, 6-love.
I think one of the funnier things I heard, Simon, in the post-match, Swiatek was so focused on the task at hand and well aware that Pliskova could turn it around at any minute that she didn't know she hadn't lost a game. She wasn't aware until her coach told her after the match that she double-bageled Pliskova. How much do you believe that, first of all?
It's difficult to say, isn't it? Because some players do find themselves so in the groove that they do kind of block everything else out. And I think with advancements in modern day sports science and mental coaches and all those sort of things, you could actually find a situation where someone is that focused. I think for the lay people among us, myself included, I'm very aware of what the score is at all times, except when I sort of forget out of being beaten so badly. But the times that you're actually playing well, I think you're very, very aware of it. And I would be surprised if she wasn't at least partially in tune with what was happening in that first set.
I cast aspersions with the way I asked that question, but I believe it because I feel like from what we've heard from her, like that's kind of what Iga Swiatek does. Like she's in the zone to a disturbing degree, and the results speak for themselves. It's clearly working. I was looking at who had won this level of title so far this year, and it's Muguruza, Barty, Sabalenka, Swiatek. That crew of people here is really rising as the most consistent force on the tour as we get towards the French Open. Naomi Osaka's not there. Naomi Osaka lost again early. Ash Barty's hurt now. And it's interesting that we circle back to the French Open, Simon, and the favorite might be this Pole who just got into the top 10 for the first time. I think it's fair to say, like, how could you not include her in the ones to beat?
I agree entirely. And I don't know that it's particularly going out too much on a limb from picking the defending champion going into the French Open and someone who dominated in a fashion that hadn't been seen in decades last year to go on and, have that achievement again. I think the only one, honestly, who stands in our way is Ashley Barty, which is why we were so excited for that matchup last week and why it was high on our agenda to see what the test of both players was, because they really are for me, the hot favourites going into the French Open, and it wouldn't shock or surprise me if the draw works out okay that those two end up in the final against each other.
Let's hope Ash is healthy. I think the rain was a bit of an issue in Rome, and the way Barty's match went down and when she withdrew against Coco Gauff, it wasn't quite clear what exactly happened, but I think the arm had been troubling her for a while, and her serve was completely gone pretty much, which is a big deal in tennis, Bush. I've been told that the serve needs to be a thing that you've got to win, so let's hope she's all right there. But I think for Swiatek purposes, boy, peaking at the right time as well. What a week for her. She saved 2 match points in the round of 16. Simon, you know who else did this tournament in the round of 16? Rafael Nadal, and they both ended up winning the tournament. That's something.
Yeah, I think that Nadal-Djokovic match, really, this tournament in general had a lot of ups and downs, and the rain played havoc with the schedule, and we ended up having players playing sometimes 3 matches in a day, which is ridiculous for top-level athletes to try and do that. But I think just closing on Swiatek, the movement is something that is astonishing to me. She is so graceful, the way that she moves around a tennis court, and everyone's going to look at the big, fizzing, fully Western forehand that she has and the amount of spin and just how elegant that shot looks. But she is a remarkable mover on a tennis court, and especially on a clay court. It's unbelievably graceful. And
it's controlled aggression as well. Like, she's moving with a purpose. I think every point she played against Pliskova, you could understand what she was thinking or what her intent was. And it's miraculous to watch because, again, this is not someone that's been around for a long time. This is really a newcomer on the scene, so who knows how much further she can progress in terms of her game. Iga Swiatek looks pretty damn good, though, as we stand here, exiting Rome with the French Open on the horizon. All right, Simon, we've changed gears slightly. Roger Federer, the man, is coming back to the tour. He's coming back at home in Geneva, Switzerland. He'll play on the clay there. Quote, "It's important to see the way I'll react physically and mentally because I think the tennis is there," said Federer in an interview with a Swiss TV station. "I want to see the way the knee reacts because sometimes it'll react differently in competition than practice because of the stress of the competition and all that. That could be why there are still some questions. Anyway, I'll have to play a dozen matches to know the way I feel." A dozen, Simon. That where? Where is he going to get a dozen matches before Wimbledon? That's the $1 million question. Can he find enough?
I guess it depends on whether you classify practice matches as matches. Probably not. Like actual tour level matches. I think he's going to be struggling to find that, isn't he? It's going to be an interesting one. Federer, by the way, who had a lot of interesting quotes this week as well, that it's always funny when he's back on the tour, is that any journalist takes the opportunity to ask him about literally anything. And I get this, right? Like any top level athlete has to sit and field questions about it. I think Pep Guardiola was talking about this, wasn't he, when off the back of the European Super League, is that he sat down in front of the cameras and basically said, we get interviewed 4 times a week. We have to sit down with the press 4 times a week. So that's press conferences before and after matches. And we have to answer to everything. We answer to Brexit. We answer to like the European Super League. We actually answer to the matches. And this is true of top level tennis players, is that Roger Federer seems to get asked about everything. I saw he had a quote this week about the Olympics, about the vaccine, about him coming back, about Rafael Nadal, about Novak Djokovic. So the dude, you know, he's an honest soldier, isn't he? He goes up there and answers the questions, and it makes headlines for a lot of these organizations. I
mean, and the vaccine stuff is obviously positive to hear and not super shocking. Fed normally has sane opinions. I don't know how else to describe being pro-vaccine, but like he thinks properly. I don't know. I don't want to give him too much credit here, but it's good. And it's like, yes, to protect everyone involved, vaccination is important. And the more people like him saying that isn't a bad thing, as we get into the stage now where I think we meet people who are just outright denying the vaccine when it's out there, if you're in a developed country or you're lucky enough to live in certain places. So hopefully when tennis stars or whoever voices their support for things like this, even 1 or 2 people are convinced that it's right for them, because I think that's how the world works now, Simon, as troubling as that may sound.
No, it's true. And I thought his quotes were actually relatively good as well. Like he highlighted the things that he was supposed to do. He basically did the statesman's role that he's kind of been cast in by the tour at this point. So it wasn't anything overly spectacular, or I'm not quite sure if you stack these quotes up alongside someone like Ashley Barty in terms of some of the work that she's sort of done and sort of her honesty around it, but it more than did the job. So I'm pleased to see that.
It's the bare minimum, baby. If you can clear that hurdle, you're good in our books. It doesn't take a lot. Cough, Novak. Cough, cough, Novak Djokovic. In less positive news in terms of comebacks, Andy Murray had been in Rome. He was practicing, not entered in the draw, but he was looking good. He practiced with Novak Djokovic, which produced some interesting quotes from Novak saying that he looks ready and Andy looks like the Andy of old. But Murray will not play in the French Open. Not a total surprise, Bush, but he was gearing up for this, and I think part of the comeback had this clay swing in line before he really targeted Wimbledon. Not a surprise, but I mean, we are at the point now where I was reading Russell Fuller in the BBC talking about how much Andy's played. It's been 11 matches since October 2019, pelvic, groin injuries, COVID in there, really frustrating attempts to play that were derailed at the beginning of the year. He's really now zeroing in on Wimbledon. And even though things have not gone to plan at all, I kind of think this should have been the plan all along, right? This sounds like the most reasonable way to get back to this real shot or attempt for Andy Murray on the tour. It really makes sense to hone in on now, going back home and winning on the grass.
I think that was always the plan all along. You're going to be regular listeners to Open Era are going to be sick of me saying this, and I apologize again, but I really feel like this was always the target. It was always grass. It was always Queens, and it was always Wimbledon. And the fact that he hasn't been able to play there probably is a reflection of why he's still trying to come back and play tennis. I think he wanted to end things on his own terms. If you watch that documentary, he's very clear about wanting to do it at Wimbledon the first time round. His first retirement, his first time that he was retired by the tour, I guess is more accurate. Not sure it was him that did it, but whatever. Anyway, so yeah, let's keep an eye on this grass court season. Again, I'm not a psychic on this, and I'm not inside of his head, but I'd be shocked if he doesn't hang up the racket and call it a day following Wimbledon if he gets to play there this year.
How do you feel about Andy being kind of rewritten out of the big three? I think there's some revisionist history about how how good Andy really was when he was on, and like people underestimating just how of important of a player he was with these other guys.
Right, and that's an interesting narrative to really tackle as well, is that I think he has been thrown in or put in that mix with someone like Stanislas Wawrinka or Juan Martín del Potro as well, hasn't he? Sort of retrospectively, he's been retconned, as they say in the comic book world. And that doesn't seem fair to me. I mean, this dude is a phenomenon in his own right, to be world number one when he did at the point of his career, to be a double gold medalist at the Olympic Games, to be a multiple Grand Slam champion in the era that he played in is astonishing. And it was the big four. It was that for a reason, is that he was that good. And I think that's being forgotten.
It's a shame, really. And I think the way Andy carries himself and just the person he is, he will always be closely linked with the game, and in a good way in terms of driving the game forward. But I think for the fan in me and someone who wants to like love to delve into the past of tennis and historic moments and those matches that we will do a show on in a year or so that happened 30 years ago, Andy Murray to me was massively important, and we shouldn't forget that, because it's also easy to miss the mark with Murray because we're able to watch Novak and Rafa still going and Fed still kicking around, right? Like we are not able to really do that with Andy. And I think if he was able to stay healthy, obviously, or even a bit healthier than he is now, not to say perfectly healthy, but at some level to play consistently, it'd be a different story, but he's just not there yet. Hopefully things change soon for him there. Bush, any other headlines for you before we get to Nadal Joker?
I think really the Murray thing, just to close out on it, is really kind of fascinating when you consider that the dude has a metal hip. Like, he's gone through all of this, and that stands in stark contrast to the two men that we're going to talk about in a second between his peers, both Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic. And it really is astonishing the problems that he's had with injuries, which honestly kind of came out of nowhere. Like, he was playing the best tennis of his life when he was world number one and got struck down by multiple injuries. And if it wasn't for that, he could be in this final in Rome. It's fair to say that, because of the level that he was at and the way that he'd fought his entire career to get the respect and the stature to be that world number one and to be consistently competing at the top end of Masters tournaments in the way that he was. And he was the dude. That's what people tend to forget. Like, for that period, for that 6-month period when he was world number one, he was the way that we talk about Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, and Rafael Nadal. He was that dude, and that's kind of been forgotten a little bit. And it's kind of remarkable, really, that now we're talking about a dude trying to go out on his own terms at Wimbledon.
Wild. Time spares no one. It's undefeated. It'll come for you next. However, as Novak and Rafa are able to prove, maybe there is hope for the old geezers yet. Next Gen Who will go through the final that was in Rome. Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. Anytime Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal are on the other sides of the draw, and we are at a Masters 1000 event, you kind of think that they're going to meet in the final, but it doesn't always work out that way. We've seen some interesting finalists at every Masters event so far, Bush, but we got a return to normalcy in Rome. I could list off a ton of statistics for you in terms of how many times these guys have played, but I think the top line stuff, as we leave, 36 titles apiece at the Masters level for Novak and Rafa, and now Nadal has won his 10th title in Rome. He has 11 at Monte Carlo, double-digit wins in 2 different places, Bush. I mean, not a classic, I'll give you that, but I want your top line takeaways from the 57th edition of Nadal Djokovic.
Ooh, it's a really good question of whether or not the matchup itself is more of a headline, or how they both got there and what the week was for the pair of them. Because I think you could write a narrative about this week is that they both had to fight harder than they've had to fight for a long, long time to get to a final of a Masters title. And I think that's where I net out this week is that I thought they both looked dog tired at the start of that third set. They both looked like their age had finally caught up with them. And then an absolute explosion happened from Rafael Nadal to close out and win the title. He won, I don't know, it was sort of like 15 points, not in a row, but like 15-2 to end the third set and really cement himself in to get that break to go up 4-2. It was a tough week for both of them, and I thought they looked like they had both been spent, but Rafa had just that final gear to go to when he needed it.
Credit where it's due. Novak Djokovic played 2 matches on Saturday after his quarterfinal against Stefanos Tsitsipas was delayed due to rain. Tsitsipas, who I think has to be asking himself a lot of questions now in terms of when he will be able to maybe take out these guys when the stakes are the highest, because the questions are still there. And Novak talking about the next gen mockingly, I thought was very interesting, because I'm kind of with you, Simon. Like, I don't know if we can take so much away from this singular matchup just because we've seen it on clay a lot. We kind of know what the deal is. Rafa's usually going to take it if it's on the surface. I thought the second set dip from Rafa was a bit concerning, and it kind of harkened back to what we saw from him against Denis Shapovalov when he wasn't really all there and found a way against another next-gen guy who couldn't quite close it. It was just two cats really grinding it out, and then grinding it out to give us a glimpse of probably what we're going to see at the French Open if the draw works out. But I think you're totally right. It's about who they beat, and I think how they survived more so than this matchup of these two guys in the final, because really the script did kind of play out like we've seen it several times. But I think when we get into the 3-set environment, it feels like every point is so immense. Every point has a lot riding on it. And I think that singular drama is something that only these two guys can produce when they play each other. It's not like that when Fed's involved.
And I think it's that other factor that we tend to forget as sports fans, no matter what the sport is, that we always concentrate on the technical ability on the court, in the arena, on the pitch, whichever you want to talk about. And you tend to forget about that match play nous, about the brain and just the resilience to overcome things. And that really was this week for the pair of them. They both just found a way. They weren't at their best. They perhaps weren't even playing well enough to beat their opponents, like in terms of technical ability and shot making. But they have enough tools in the bag and have been there so many times that just being able to manage those situations. And it is such a, overused and kind of disgraceful cliche that it's, experience wins out, but it's kind of true against some of these players, right? Some Tsitsipas, Shapovalov, these are players who have not been in these moments, and they didn't know how to handle it when they got close to it. And the net result is they both lost in matches that they should have won, and they will learn from this. And I do think it's going to be a really positive experience for the both of them, because that does send a message. Regardless of the result of that, it does send a message that both of them got really, really damn close against these guys, as has a lot of players against both Djokovic and Nadal on clay courts this year. And as soon as that crack starts to appear, we saw it against Federer, right? As soon as the crack starts to appear and the young guys think they have an opportunity to beat them, it does start to make it a lot more difficult for them. The aura goes and it starts to break down. And now whether or not that extends to the French Open and Rafael Nadal, does he drop a set? I'm yet to be convinced, but we've seen this story before in so many other ways. But I don't know. This does feel a little bit different, I have to say, with this the sheer quantity of players that are out there on the men's side against these two, that you walk into a match on a clay court and you think, it's not 100% written in stone. It's not 100% there, right?
I'll flip it on you, Bush. Imagine you're one of those guys and you're watching Novak try to beat Rafa on clay. And it's Novak who's been pummeling the rest of them everywhere else, and he can't do it? There has to be zero belief when you play Rafa at this point, right? I think the elephant in the room is that Rafa Nadal is almost untouchable in the biggest moments on this surface, even though there were points in the final where it didn't look that way. And maybe if we go through this match chronologically, Simon, the beginning of it, I thought Novak was very aggressive, a bit tired, but he emptied the tank in the beginning, and he executed that well, because what we have seen, at least in the last time they had met, on a similar stage at the French Open final. He didn't start that way. He started kind of slow, and Rafa blew the doors off him immediately. He didn't allow that to happen in the first set here. But I think what he learned and what he obviously knows is that if you don't consolidate the break and if you are not still redlining all the way in the beginning, the door will be open enough for Nadal to find himself right back into the set. And it happened that way. 75 minutes later, Nadal's taken it 7-5. And you wonder, is this just the same set we've seen from these guys the last 10 years on the surface? Because it felt like that. I mean, Novak couldn't get through or couldn't push through with his forehand, and Rafa kind of seized on that.
Right, and I think one of the biggest things that you're going to come out of this and some of the analytics side of it is going to be how many looping ball hands Nadal sent to the backhand of Novak Djokovic, putting it up high, making him either jump into that backhand or making him develop his own pace on that wing as a sort of recovery method for Nadal to get back into the point. I thought it was really interesting, the pair of them, of how little they actually go for in their backhands anymore. Like how they are both working around that wing despite having just magnificent backhands on both of them by like, you know, they have two of the best backhands of all time, and they're both still looking to set their forehands up. They're still trying to lay the table for it because they both hit much bigger and much harder off their forehand wing. And I thought that was, it's more obvious, I think, on a clay court because you can't hit winners in the same way and you have to set up your winners. And it was another, I would say, enthralling one for the people that enjoy watching tactical sides of tennis as opposed to necessarily the drama that comes with it. I think it got a little bit more exciting at the back end of the third set, but in general, I'm not sure this was one that the neutral would have enjoyed a whole lot.
I think on the chess side, like, they were both pushing each other into places in the court where you don't normally see players play. And that perhaps is the best evidence of how special these guys are. Like, you don't see, like, when Nadal tripped and rolled a bit in the first set, he was in a really awkward position in the court, and he hit a winner off the shot, but you don't normally see players in that area consistently. But because of the way both players were playing, where the drop shot was consistently employed and both players were trying to look to shorten points when they could, it really did become a tactical battle, and one that, again, is fascinating because these guys have so much tape on each other, more tape possibly than any other players have in one rivalry. So what don't they know, or what can they find to exploit this far into the game? It's not a whole lot. And I thought Bush in the second set, Novak started to try to go to Rafa's backhand because he knew he wasn't going for anything off of it.
Right, and that long narrative that exists about Rafael Nadal, that he's a defensive counter-puncher, is not true anymore. It's not been true for a long time. As he's stood further forward in a court, he's, up the swing weight of the racket, gone for more on the first serve. There was a stat that got shown on Tennis Channel back end of the third set, which said points won over 9 strokes. I think Djokovic was up 15-4 in that point in time. Like, Novak Djokovic is the defensive player at this point. Like, he is the counterpuncher. He is the dude that stands further behind the baseline. And Nadal is the one that's trying to dictate more with the forehand and stepping further in the court. Imagine having this conversation and saying that in 2008 in terms of how these games have evolved. And it's one of those that it doesn't really come full circle until you start looking at it and what this matchup looks like.
Another one of those, this is how old you are stats, or time is moving rapidly. The last Masters 1000 finals without either Novak or Rafa in the final, 2004, Bush in Rome, was the last time that a final at the Italian Open didn't feature one of these guys. That is messed up. It's really messed up. And also, Rafa was the 5th youngest in history to play their own final. Now, he's the oldest to play in it. So, I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love these guys. I love the big three, quote unquote, and I love this era. But again, I feel mega washed hearing some of these stats, and I'm like, okay, this is enough here. I wanted to hit on some other players, Simon, on the ATP, but is there anything else Novak, Rafa related that we should hit?
I don't think so. I think it was a fun week that I'm very, very curious to see how their bodies recover from this, because it was a tough one for the pair of them. We do tend to forget they are getting older. The matches do add up, especially as competitive as they were this week. I will have to say, the one final, I guess, thought on this whole thing is that it did make me smile about all of those quotes that came out last week following Alexander Zverev beating Rafael Nadal. And it's like, he's finally got his number. Nadal comes back and just wipes him off the floor, completely dusts him, learns the lessons, and says, not this time, kid. It was quite amusing, and again, very cathartic to see Alexander Zverev being annihilated on court.
At a real clay tournament. No shade intended at Madrid, but we got back to sea level where things are a bit more normal, and you saw some normal results. And once again, the Nadal factor on clay is just ridiculous. The odds against Novak after the first set were astronomical, and if you had put a $5 on him to come back and win, you had to be feeling okay after set 2. But imagine that feeling over 5 sets, and it's understandable why the thought of beating Rafael Nadal at the French Open is such a daunting prospect. But that's why they play the matches. We'll see how that goes. Elsewhere, though, Simon, the other big story, I mean, we've talked about Italian tennis on the come-up, and we talked about Yannick Sinner and Lorenzo Musetti and Matteo Berrettini, and going through, I don't know how far deep we got to Stefano Travaglia. We got, how much do you want to go here? We can keep going. Who else do we want to say? But the guy that I don't think we don't mention that much, and it's partly haterade from me because I'm not a fan of how late his grunt is when he plays, Lorenzo Sonego. Captivating the crowd in Rome. I thought some of the cooler hometown crowd moments happened on Saturday against Rublev, and then when he took Novak to the limit. A, the crowd was amazing, but B, Sonego, man, this is now pretty consistent over the past couple years. He beat Novak last year in Vienna, but on clay, he is definitely a problem, and he will be a problem at the French Open.
He will be, and he's also one of those that knows how to entertain a crowd as well, so he's going to get a lot of that. Maybe Parisian crowd. Are they going to be in the stadium? Open question, I guess, still at this point. But up to, I think this is a career high ranking for him, or he's going to be right around there. I think he's going to be around the 26, 27 mark, which feels about right, doesn't it, for him? For a dude that's on his day can take out just about anyone, has done as well. You know, there's a reason that he absolutely obliterated Novak Djokovic at the back end of the... I mean, let's also take into account that Novak Djokovic was on his magical mystery tour at the back end of 2020. So maybe don't read too much into that.
And that, we can take the asterisks away maybe a bit from that one, because you're right. Everyone was like, well, how much did Novak care? And does this matter at all? But I think we saw no fluke. You're exactly right. But I think he's fallen now into the Dan Evans sphere of, if he's in your half or he's around there, he could definitely take you out. He could lose 6-1, 6-2, but he could take you out for sure.
Which is fun and exciting. And a player that I think we, again, spoiled for choice. You're not in Italy at the moment. My goodness, what a renaissance for that country. I seem to say it every single week, and I'm sorry, I'll stop doing it now. But bloody hell, how many players do they have?
It's incredible. And I think in Canada, we were talking a lot of smack. We were like, look at us, Italy, and we're pretty good as well. We got a lot of guys, but it looks like Italy might be surpassing Canada in terms of individual players. But on that note, Denis Shapovalov, as we alluded to earlier, came very close to taking out Rafael Nadal on clay in Rome, which is one of the hardest things you can do in the sport. Bush, he looked fantastic through large points of this match, but I think the capitulation in the second set and not closing out with 2 match points on his racket, you're gonna wonder what could have been. And I think for Denis, it's for me, I will take some positives for sure. And I thought the relationship with his box and his camp and Rohan Bopana and like the crew he surrounded himself with, it seems like he's in a good place mentally. And a lot of people have lost to Rafael Nadal before. They haven't been that close, so hopefully he takes the good stuff from it.
So you know how like the YouTube algorithm is a poisonous scourge on the world? I think that's fair to say at this point, right?
Yes.
I was watching the highlights of it. So they had the all angles thing of Shapovalov's best shots against Rafael Nadal. And the next up video was 5 times that Stan Wawrinka has shocked Rafael Nadal on clay. And I was like, good job, YouTube. Good job.
Hey, right? Foreshadowing.
That's not bad. That's pretty good.
Do you think Denis is watching Stan videos like 23 hours of the day when he's not training about what he needs to do? You think Magnus Norman's getting that call? What's he doing these days?
Somewhere. Or what price for Stan Wawrinka himself to be the coach? Just throwing that out there.
Jeez. I love it. I love it. Felix Auger-Aliassime got his, what is now a ceremonial win over Diego Schwartzman in the top 10. If you are a guy with a pulse on the ATP Tour and looking for a top 10 win, and you find yourself in Diego Schwartzman's part of the draw, you've got good things coming to you probably. It was raining though, weird match, weird conditions. Felix looked really good. He followed that up with an utterly confounding loss to Delbonis, where he really, really tossed away the tiebreak and then just went away. And I think we're left with, again, some of the same questions we've been asking about where is the progression track here. I think throwing the tiebreak is one thing, Bush, but the capitulation afterwards, not great.
Wasn't good, was it? He's not looked good in a while. This relationship clearly is going to take a bit of time to develop, so I don't think we're ready to... Well, we're not going to write him off at all. He's still incredibly young, and no one makes 7 ATP Tour finals by being a bad player, of course, but this is so bizarre. He's one of the more difficult players to predict and sort of understand what the next phase of his career looks like, or the next stage of his development, because I kind of feel like with a lot of those top dudes that we were watching come up, either Zverev or Tsitsipas, or even someone like Medvedev as well, we had a pretty good trajectory of what they were going to be in terms of how they're going to run hot and cold, the kind of surfaces they're going to look good on. Auger-Aliassime is just all over the place. I mean, if you told me at this point that he would make another like 10 ATP finals and win like 3 of them, but never make it into the top 10 for his career, I could totally buy that. Like, I genuinely could. That would be like something that I would take as a possibility at this point. And if you told me that he was world number 1 and won 2 Grand Slams, I would take that as well. Like, it's the range is enormous because we just have no idea what the final version of him looks like in terms of which surface he competes well, because he competes well on all of them. That's the thing. Like, he's so good on everything. He moves so well, has all the things that you want, and just can't put it together when at the back end of the biggest tournament.
That's exactly it. The issue is that he is too good at everything, but not good enough at everything, which I think a lot of tennis players find themselves in at this juncture of their career. And obviously things can go many different ways, but yeah, it's searching time. It's a searching period. And I mean, you got a pandemic layered on this as well. So I'm sure there's a lot going on, but the world remains Felix's oyster. Simon, to close up here though, let's take Nadal and Djokovic out of the equation, because I think they're pretty clearly 1 and 2 in terms of the favorite going into France in Paris. Who's your 3? Who is your third favorite? Because I wonder what the last few weeks have done to change your perception in that regard.
No, they haven't. Third favorite is still Tsitsipas, and I don't actually think it's close. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I really he's looked so good to me, and looks like he is a dude that's ready to make that. He should have beaten Novak Djokovic. He should have been, and I think if he plays, I think if the two match up again at the French Open, I think he beats him. I really do. And I also think he feels, just given the last like 2 months that he's had on the surface, that he feels like he can beat Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal on this surface, even though he's not done it yet. I feel like he thinks he can get there, and that I think has got to stand him in good stead for going into this tournament.
I wanted to rip you a bit, and I wanted to pick Dominic Thiem, but I have not seen enough from Dominic at all, really, to be confident in that. And he lost to a very game Sonego, but I want it to be Dominic Thiem as my third, because I think he's got everything you want. Plus, the huge trump card of having a slam already, so he does not have to play like his life is on the line or be scared shitless when he's playing these guys at the business set, because he's got one. So I want to pick Dominic, but I need to see more physically, and I hope he's up to the level that we've seen by the time Paris comes, because for me, that belief that Stefano shows at times is strong, but I don't know. Over 5 sets, I don't have as much faith as you do.
I feel like we're in mid-May. Every single year that I have known you, Devang, we're going into our 6th year that we've known each other. You picked Dominic Thiem to win this tournament, and it's not happened yet. Are you going for it again? You going to take another crack at it?
Oh, I have, though. It's legitimately been every year for a long time, but I won't do it yet. We're not on a preview show yet, but stay tuned. Stay tuned for this sad relationship to extend. Okay, coming up after the break, we close up shop with our parting shots on this week's Open Era. Welcome back to the Open Era Podcast. It's that time again for our parting shot. Simon, I will let you do the honors. Go first.
Right, so let's start with a weekly check-in on fashion and also combine it with a pet peeve of mine, which is Riley Opelka. Not him himself, actually, because I actually think he had a fantastic week and proved to a lot of people that he is more than just a serve. Did you see the outfit to start with? Did you see the feeler outfit that he was rocking this week?
I'm a bit concerned about your reaction to this, but I saw it and I loved it.
So did I. I liked it a lot as well. I thought it was pretty cool.
I think Fila's got us, man. I think Fila's been listening or something, because the 180 I've done from a Fila hater to a Fila stan is shocking, but I thought it was great.
I really, really liked it. I thought it was really interesting and a bit outside the box and a throwback to some of the more horrible stuff in the 90s. So I was pleased with it. The other side of the Opelka thing is that every year around this time, there is a journalist or a person or a pundit in the tennis world who a big serving player comes around and has a good couple of weeks, and you always see it cycled. X person is a dark horse for Wimbledon. Come on, people. It's never happened. It's never going to happen. I remember this back in the days where Ivo Karlovic won at Queen's, and then Boris Becker had picked him to win it in the middle of 2006. Like, what are you doing, dude? Stop.
Hey.
Stop.
Ivo walked so Riley could run. Bush, this is the prophecy of the tall man coming. Also, how could he be a dark horse when you're a giant? A dark horse is supposed to be under the radar and maybe he's an underdog, not expected. This man, he's literally towering over people. There's no such thing as catching someone by surprise at that height. You can't do it.
We've been wrong about a lot of things on this podcast, and our predictions are pretty terrible. I feel very, very safe in saying that Riley Opelka will not win Wimbledon this year. I think that's a safe bet, and I'm very
big man. All right. Wow, I'm proud of you.
Going out on a limb.
I'll go to the less positive probably, but I've been pretty strong, I think, in saying that I thought Naomi Osaka would figure it out pretty quickly on clay, and if she got into a situation where she was in a big match, she'd be okay, because tennis is tennis and service is surface, and even though the movement is obviously very key, she's just too good not to figure it out. But I'm beginning now, I think, to realize the process is going to be longer than a couple weeks or a couple months, because though Jessica Pegula is having a bonkers season, another loss on clay makes me downgrade Naomi, I think, to outside of my top 5 favorites for the French Open. And I didn't think I'd be saying that, Simon, a couple weeks ago, but I'm going to say it now. So I'll make a couple of it.
Again, going out on a limb here, Devang. I appreciate your honesty on this one.
I have just selected a multiple-time Grand Slam winner, one of the best players on the tour, to be out of the conversation entirely for a slam, and you're saying I'm not going out on a limb? I think that's a pretty bold prediction.
Sure. Okay, I'll give you that. Why not? She, again, did not look very, very good, did she?
No.
I feel like me tongue-in-cheek saying that the warning sirens were going and sort of sarcastically saying that everyone needs to cool their jets on Naomi Osaka. Maybe I was wrong on that one. It didn't look very good this week either, did it? It didn't look like much progress had been made.
We don't play forever on clay, right? It's just the thing where it's half the year. So it's a bit ridiculous to just be out of the equation for half the year, right? I think you can ask that question.
I also think it's interesting that we talk in the sport, and I think those of us who are close to the community and have seen the evolution of the surfaces over the last 40 years or so, always talk about how the surfaces have been neutered to a certain extent and how grass is not the same, clay is not the same, the hard courts, rebound ace is not the same as it once was. And then you have Naomi Osaka, who is so dominant on a hard court, coming and playing on clay court and looking like she has no idea what she's doing for the most part. Goes to show you that those courts still mean something, right? They still mean something, and it still requires you to play to the strength of those courts, even if we think it's much worse than it was. I guess let's put it this way. Can you imagine Naomi Osaka playing on a clay court from 1990? How different it must be.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's a great point. But I mean, hey, and also maybe we should figure out how to not have lines sticking out on a court so that one of the greatest players of all time doesn't hurtle into a stanchion head first. Maybe we should do that too. I don't know. Just saying.
Seems reasonable to me. Far too reasonable a take for this podcast.
What do you got? All right.
Roger Federer, coming back, of course, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast. The Swiss great owns a 32-match winning streak on home soil. His last loss in Switzerland came on the 27th of October 2013 in Basel. In the final, Devang, everyone out there in the open era universe, who was it against?
Oh, no. He lost. Oh, I remember it was a big thing. Was it Del Potro?
It was Del Potro. Oh, idiot. Look at you go.
Let's go.
So every time we do these quizzes, Devang, every time you ask me a question, and we get it, and we're just like, oh God, we're such nerds. This is terrible. We shouldn't know this stuff.
The problem is I know it well because I know how psychologically wounded I still was from the U.S. Open loss to Delpo. So that the fact that it happened in Switzerland, it was like he had come and attacked Roger physically in his own home with the hubris. But little did we know we weren't going to get to see that Delpo fit and healthy that often, which sucks as well. So should have cherished it.
I think that match winning streak will probably come to an end this week. Probably, I think it's fair to say.
We did. I guess the expectations are so weirdly like the thing with Fed, the French Open I went to in 2019. He somehow made the semifinal. He played Rafael Nadal in the semifinal, and going into that, we're like, this guy, Jesus, what's he doing here? It's like, Fed, don't show up, man. You look like a UPS postal man in that Uniqlo getup. What are you doing? So who knows? Are they
ever going to live that one down?
I hope not. But that's the thing. Who knows what to expect? You just can't run into one of the goats on the surface, and you might be okay. And in Geneva, I think Dennis is there. It could be interesting to see him against them in that matchup. But yeah, it'll be just the Fed on the clay thing. You could argue you should do the Murray and just skip it entirely, which some have. But I'm not going to argue with him.
I'm really genuinely excited, I have to say. I'm excited to see what he looks like anytime this dude plays again.
Exactly.
We're so lucky to see him in play. And we do tend to forget. The same thing is true with Serena Williams on the WTA side as well, is that they are 39 and 40 respectively. Like, it's astonishing that we still get to see them play at this level.
Serena and Venus are playing in Parma too this week. So isn't that, I mean, the thing is, like, Fed is still really good on clay, one of the best ever. And watching him on the surface is fun as hell. So the slide, and we talking about the movement all the time and the poetry and the artistry on clay. It's even nicer, I would argue, with Roger when he was at full flight. So it'll be fun to watch for sure. I wanted to give major daps to Sharon Fitchman and Juliana Olmos, the doubles team, Canada, Mexico, NAFTA. We'll call it NAFTA, I guess, whatever the new thing that's called. We'll go back to NAFTA because that's in my youth. They weren't even supposed to be in this draw, Bush. They were alternates. They get into the Rome draw, and then here's who they beat. Maddox Sanz-Pegula. Sway Mertens, monster team. Goff Kudermentova saved a match point in that. Sibihara Ioma. Blandanovic Vondrosa saved 2 match points in the second set. How cool is that?
Amazing story. Quite a few teams in there could have a claim to be favourites going into a Grand Slam as well at doubles level. So quite the pedigree to get through and do what they did this week.
I wanted to update as well the ATP Top 8 race because we've joked about our boys Hubie Urkacz and Alexander Karatsev being involved, Martin Fucsovics, but I think the dream might be over, Simon. Here is the updated post-Rome Top 8. Stefanos 1, Novak 2, Rublev 3, Zverev 4, Medvedev 5, Nadal 6, Karatsev 7, 8, Hurkacz, Berrettini, Sinner just on the outside. I imagine you had 4 Italians in this. We could have 4 Italians in this by the end of the year. That's incredible. I have a couple more, Simon, actually, but they're bigger picture stuff that might take way longer than the end of the show. So you should go first now if you've got anything left in the tank.
I've always got things left in the tank. Jannik sent it into the top 20 as well. Bear in mind that match against Nadal was really interesting as well to see what the level was in terms of his progression. I thought it was a really fascinating matchup, and the ball striking was really amazing. It's incredible. It sounded like a gunshot going off every single time they were rallying. So disappointing that he loses to Nadal, and his press conference was quite amusing if you go back and watch it, because it really genuinely looks like a 19-year-old, like the most despondent teenager ever. Slumped shoulders, just so disappointed with the world. I thought it was very entertaining to watch it.
I love how much he loves tennis. Like he's always watching tennis at these events. Like even after he got eliminated, he was watching a bunch of stuff on both tours. I love that.
Did you know one thing about Jannik Sinner that doesn't get spoken of enough? He has the most RPMs on his backhand on either tour, either the ATP or the WTA. Amazing statistic.
Very amazing. Okay. I end with, it's a big one from friend of the show, Luke, on the Discord. Will tennis lose more when Rafa retires rather than Roger Federer as I become a Bostonite? And Luke said this, and I think Luke's a Fed guy too, so I thought about this, but Rafa's been in every epic match Rafa has been in. It's his will, his battle that's made it that much more special. And obviously not taking anything away from Roger at all. And we're stands, etc. Like we're deep in the bag for Roger. But I was thinking about this question and then watching Rafa again win. It really is unparalleled. Like we run out of superlatives, but I really cannot do this man justice. Like it's absolutely wild to see this consistently this long since he was wearing pantaloons and a tank top to now, where he's got barely any hair left on the top of his head and he's hurdling and diving and still digging as deep as possible to win every single point. Like it's remarkable, and I think Luke might be right.
I'm genuinely looking forward to the tell-all autobiography and documentary about Rafael Nadal, because the thing that fascinates me most about him is not the technical side of it. It's mentally what goes through his head. What keeps him going? I just don't understand. Like, we know what Fed is. Fed loves the game and just loves to be around it, likes to travel. Really, I think, honestly, just loves being like a playboy,
like a player, like a tennis player. Yeah, he likes being a tennis
player. He likes being a tennis player, yeah.
That is baseball analysis right there. He's just a tennis player, you know? He's just a tennis player out there.
You know, he does everything, right? He hits forehands, he hits backhands, you know, he's just a tennis player. He's just a man's man. Novak Djokovic just hates everyone and is just driven by, you know...
the chip, a massive chip on his shoulder, which he's used to great effect.
Yeah, the Aaron Rodgers chip, right? Like, no, like, dude, we get it. You get it. We don't need to. You don't need to carry the chip anymore. No, but like, there's 22 teams, 23 teams. All right, stop, dude. Like, we get it. It's all right. It is okay. Calm down. Nadal, I've got no idea. I just genuinely don't know. Probably a bit of both, right?
Yeah, it's way harder to parse, and it's just. And it's funny because I feel a lot of people in my life who are tennis people or watch tennis a lot, they came around on Rafa super late, and they're only now being this just amazed by him, because it's like, why is he doing it? Like, what is he playing for, right? Or where does he find it? Where does he, and maybe that tell-all book will say it all. And it leads me, Simon, to now my final parting shot, which is, I think, maybe more controversial than what I just said via Luke. Is this the best single matchup? Nadal-Djokovic? Like, is this the best matchup because of everything we've said, like the tactics and the physicality and the stakes? And as much as we love Fed and Nadal on clay, it's useless to even have that match. And as much as we love Fed and Novak, it's like, well, at this point, where are we playing? Like, it really has to be on a couple courts for it to be a match. But I think Nadal-Djokovic, no matter where you go, you end up usually getting something pretty good. So is this the best single matchup ever of the sport?
No, because it's subjective. So if you think it is, then it is, but I don't think it is. And that's where I net out on that. Nadal Federer is.
I mean, like most of the stuff we talk about, hilariously subjective, but I think I've had the most memories or things that I'll never forget from Nadal Federer. Like that, those matches for me they're imprinted somewhere that I just won't be able to forget them. And it's less the case with Federer Djokovic or Nadal-Djokovic, and that's probably just because of my fandom. But I'm thinking back to Australia and 2009 and everything that's happened since, and where they beat each other and how they've kind of progressed. And Novak saying in the late aughts, like, I know how to beat Rafa on clay, and like I'll figure it out as a teenager, and kind of that bravado to where we are now. It's just ridiculous. And Novak's next gen line and talking about it, kind of stamping that final thing on people trying to put these guys out to pasture too soon. It was something. It was pretty special. I will say though that I'm gonna go with Nadal-Djokovic. I think this matchup produces the most interesting tennis that I've ever seen in my life.
You know my opinion on this, which is Novak Djokovic is a textbook. He's a textbook of how you're supposed to play tennis. He is Tim Duncan. He is big fundamentals.
Is that Tim Duncan just entered into the Hall of Fame? Is Tim Duncan Novak? Is that I think that's it.
Just end the episode here. We've done it.
We got
Everyone,
it. We got it.
Handshakes around. We're finished.
It's perfect though. It fits.
I'm not even going to finish my point. I'll just leave it out there and we can talk about it again in the future.
Awesome. All right. Big tournament in Rome. But we move forward towards D-Day at the French Open, where big titles are on the line. We're also on patreon.com/OpenEraPod. Join us there. Get the show ad-free. Get it early on Sunday nights. You also get Luke Takes unfiltered through my mouth, where you can see him type out that he thinks Rafa is a bigger loss than Roger. It's worth it. And we're on Twitter @OpenEraPod. It's a good place. I was tweeting like crazy on Sunday. I apologize for spamming your feed, but it had to be done because I got hyped up when Nadal and Joker play each other. All right, that's it. For Nick, Simon, and myself, thank you so much for listening to the Open Era Podcast. We'll talk to you next week.